See if this works. Have a little test run before we get started here. Be on standby for a little while. Be on standby for a little while. All right, it works. I decided to do this because I noticed a lot of people aren't really that savvy to American foreign policy. It's not discussed that often on the media, or rather in the mainstream media, due to defense contractors like Lockheed Martin purchasing stations such as CNN, Fox, and these pundits on those networks effectively becoming paid shills that choose to never discuss any of these conflicts or wars. So for a very, very, very abridged overview, the month after 9/11, the U.S. began its war in Afghanistan. We've stayed there since then. There have been efforts to get us out to no avail. And in that same period, or rather around the same time, two years later, I believe, we started our conflict in Iraq. And if I'm remembering correctly, the goal of that conflict was to get Saddam Hussein, who's been dead for, I believe, 12 years at this point. So you would think we would have gotten out of it much, much earlier. And we actually did, only to come back a couple of years later. And as I did a video earlier in the year, we announced our indefinite occupation. So we're still over there, in addition to bombing various people that live there. So then Obama gets in office after running as someone who's critical of George W.'s foreign policy. And he says, this is terrible, bad, all this stuff. And he decides to, go on this message of needing a change, change you can believe in. Yes, we can, all that stuff. So within his first year in office, he gets the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this is significant because it's ironic, as established by everything that happened after that. But there's also a line that goes something. Anyone who gets a Nobel Peace Prize usually doesn't try to get another one. So I oftentimes forget the order of the countries that he started bombing, but I remember it's Pakistan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. The Yemen one is interesting in the sense that it is now considered one of the greatest humanitarian crises in modern history. And it's frustrated me the most out of all the other ones because it literally works like this. Saudi Arabia, who is an ally of the U.S., got butthurt that their friendly government was overthrown by the Houthi rebels who are in Yemen. So their response was to go after the civilians while going after the Houthi rebels. And one of these structured strategies was to block off the ports of the country of Yemen, so they couldn't bring in any new food or medicine. At the same time, they bombed mosques, hospitals, churches, and the only people who were able to still get food decided, hey, I can become a millionaire off of this stuff, and raise the prices. So the very small bit of food that was left available was so overpriced that most people couldn't afford it, leading to at least 80. I don't know what the exact death toll is, because I only know that it at first it was over 10,000 people who had died, civilian deaths from all the drone strikes and whatnot, or the strikes period. But we've had over 85,000 children under the age of 5 die over there as a result of being starved to death and blown to pieces and whatnot. Marco says Obama and even Trump have tried getting out, but Congress is like and in favor of. I don't recall Marco, but okay. So Trump runs after 8 years of Obama and says, hey, I'm different, I'm changed, I am opposite of these people. And after nearly 2 years of him being in office, we're still in all of these wars. And what I've noticed is that a lot of times when you bring up these conflicts, there's a lot of whataboutism with his supporters. So if you say, oh, Trump, he campaigned as being different than the persons before him, and talked about corruption, only to after winning the Republican primary in May of 2016, reverse his pledge to not seek PAC money or corporation cash and start taking their donations like crazy. If you don't believe me, this is corroborated by an article. I'll post a link to it if I remember to do so later on, somebody can remind me. But this is when he first started running at the beginning, or rather midway into 2015 for the Republican nomination. He was someone who wasn't bought out, and there's a pattern of this because a lot of times people have rhetoric that doesn't exactly match what they're saying. Oh, I know Congress is pro-war, Marco. That's why I like Ro Khanna so much. And speaking of which, I do want to bring attention to a couple of times we've had. Unfortunately, I don't have a catalog of each war and its attempts by members of Congress to oppose it. But the conflict in Yemen back in March of this year, there was a resolution introduced by, I believe it was Sanders, Mike Lee, and Chris Murphy in the Senate. And it was defeated 44 to 55 by a majority of the Republicans in the Senate and a handful of Democrats, about 4 or 5 of them. And Bernie says he wants to introduce it again. All the power to him. But I thought it was really strange because a lot of times when I look at people and they talk about Trump as the monster demon devil that has destroyed everything, it always feels hard to believe it, especially as a man who is, I was around during the Bush and Obama years, and I actively remember these conflicts. They would oftentimes get briefly mentioned, a little bit here, a little bit there, but the point is, when you were around for the really terrible, there are domestic issues that they were both awful on, but when you were there for it, and now people are telling you about how things are different and stuff has changed. Oh my God, look at the economy. It all feels like this meaningless void of platitudes that you never really get the people to sit back and say, wait a second, is that real or is that not real? And so when I spoke to these Trump supporters on different social media outlets, I would find that with a lot of them, it seemed that they would either wholeheartedly support these wars. They'd drum out their own explanation. Oh, we're over there fighting terrorists, they won't come and get us. Or they would say, yeah, this is bad, but whatever. Let me see. Hold on a second. Let me go in. Walking Paradox, your comment was YouTube and their little automated system thing. You put certain words, they will mess with it. Okay, you're right. Trump hasn't destroyed everything, but he is prolonging the mistakes of the presidents before him. I agree. And that's something I've tried to explain, that there are positions that Obama had as someone who was not a fan of his that I liked, and that had to do with the normalizing of Cuban relations. We'd been conflicting with them for far too long, and the Iran nuclear deal. Everything else was trash, foreign policy wise, and that's not a researched opinion, because I can look up particular things he did that I didn't like. And so in being someone that likes to consider themselves on the side of, a person who likes to know their information, it almost feels like a paradox reality that I have all these people who will now tell me about, if they're a fan of Trump, oh man, he's making things better, he's such a great guy. And then if they're a fan of Obama, oh man, that was back when we had a respectful, wonderful guy, and it was so great. And I look at his approval rating, it's still like 60% or whatever, where you have a majority of people liking him, and it feels like, are you guys awake? Like, I had a person on Instagram who used to comment on my stuff before she turned into whatever. It's where people will change on you in 5 seconds. It's crazy. But she used to comment on my stuff, and I would post about the Yemen conflict, and her response would be, this is such a horrible thing. Those members of Congress that voted to keep this going are so awful and terrible. And I'd say to her, wait a second, if you think, they're so bad, because she later told me Obama wasn't perfect, and that's why she accepts this critique of his time in office. How are you able to just still like someone who did that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You think this policy is so evil, but then you don't think the person who started it was, like a villain or a bad guy or anything. And remember, these are the same liberals who, if you bring up, let's say, the war on drugs, they go, "Oh, that's why I hate Nixon and Reagan. They were so horrible." Well, nobody died from the war on drugs. No one, we didn't have a 85,000 children under the age of 5 die from somebody going to jail for something they shouldn't have even been bothering with in the first place. There is a certain cult of personality within Trump supporters. I agree. Walking paradox. It is. That's literally what it feels like going on places like Twitter or Instagram and having these people come on my stuff and go, "Oh man, you're drinking the establishment media Kool-Aid," which is really weird because if you listen to whether it's CNN or MSNBC, they never talk about the wars. They never criticize Trump over staying in any of these. They didn't do it to Obama. They don't do it to him. So it's really weird to have these people pretend like the media hates him so much when they're making cover for him. They're pretending none of these are going on for the purpose of making the public unaware. And they just can't pick that up. They live in this bizarro world where they think he's like fighting against all these people trying to quote unquote expose things about him. No, they're trying to cover up as much as they can because they're all in debt to the same donors. But then what I find really amusing is when I bring up the money and politics thing and why it's a big deal. There are three reactions from Republican or Trump support, whatever you want to call them. One is to pretend it doesn't exist. I actually had one who told me that, why would Trump try to take money from donors when he's already rich, as though rich people aren't trying to get even more rich. Like, guys, we have a mass shooting every day and nothing is done about it other than thoughts and prayers. The reason for that is not because, we have all these skilled legislative leaders who have thought critically about this and are looking to solve the problems. The real reason is because the NRA, in the case of Trump, they gave him $30 million, but they pay out these politicians to not have an honest debate about this. That's why within a week of a mass shooting, you can bet it will stop being talked about excessively. Closest you'll get to a discussion will be maybe like 2 years ago, this shooting happened here. That's about as good as it gets in subsequent times and years, unfortunately. So that's an example of what they like to do. They pretend that, this isn't going on. Another example is to agree with you, but then still support the trash. Like I bring up, Cruz, for example, is beholden to his donors from Wall Street, just like, Obama and the rest of a good chunk of the Democrats as well, majority of them. And this person says, yeah, corporate cash is so bad, but then they still support Cruz and Trump, even after, you make the case of how these two are corrupt. So they'd rather subscribe to the trash while knowing it's trash, and they're in their own special way of saying it. The third option is for the person to advocate something that does not reach a logical conclusion. So, for example, I talked about, Susan Collins when she said that people were trying to bribe her during the Kavanaugh vote by, offering money to her challenger. That was corruption. And I, brought up that she'd earned over 20 million from donors since becoming senator 20 years ago. She's been senator for as long as I've been alive. And this person responded on Twitter by saying, this is bribery. You guys are trying to bribe her. You people are trying to bribe her. I personally think we should have term limits. We wouldn't have any of these problems. We have term limits because apparently if you tell somebody they can only be in office for 12 years versus, 24 if they're a senator, that supposedly is going to stop them from taking corporate money. Are we forgetting that there's plenty of one-term congressmen or senators that do that exact thing in that short amount of time? And then after getting out of office, become lobbyists for that exact purpose of enriching themselves while screwing over the common man? That's how backwards thinking these people are. Marco says Bush and Obama have caused such mess that is now taken just as long as no matter. Yeah. No, Marco, this isn't the I Hate Trump show. I gave him credit for not starting any more conflicts. I do believe that within the next 2 years, if he's still in office, which I don't think that Mueller thing is going to pad out, but I do think that there's a high likelihood of going to war with Iran just because his national security advisor Bolton is pushing for regime change, and they've unfortunately put him in a position of power. So This is me trying to be as objective as possible. Why do you think I criticize both parties? I'm not doing that for popularity. I can't even show this to a majority of Democrats or Republicans without them losing their minds. Convinced his supporters that they are part of the special club, and anyone who doesn't agree with them isn't part of their little club. Yeah, but that club isn't based on being accurate or knowing what you're talking about. I'll give you an example. During the Kavanaugh thing, and that was a significant confirmation hearing because it shows how stupid people are. If you go on Murkowski's page, that was the one Republican senator who didn't vote to confirm him. People go, we're still pissed at you for voting against Kavanaugh. We're gonna get you in 2022, and they say this as though she is some obstructionist of Trump, when in reality she's not even the Republican who votes the most against Trump, at least in the Senate, is Rand Paul. But because he voted for Kavanaugh, and this wasn't mentioned on Fox or CNN, these idiots don't even know about this. I bet Trump doesn't even know about it because their entire form of person is based on low information. It's all entirely scripted to the idea of forget looking stuff up, forget PolitiFact and all these other places that try to get something right, regardless of what side somebody is on. Listen to dear leader, whether it's Trump or if you're a Democrat, I don't know, I guess Pelosi or whoever, and ignore anything bad that they've done. Just accept that you're always going to get, every time you think you're getting a diamond, there's going to be a little piece of a turd mixed in right behind it. We can't get gun control from a, let's say, I don't know, president or senator without them signing off on every war possible. Just accept that. Just get over it. That's what they want you to do. And anyone who doesn't want to play ball, they go after. I would be a much more popular commentator if all I did was shill for one side. If I was, like, let's say Candace Owens, like, oh man, I love Trump so much, he's so great, everything is wonderful, lowest unemployment ever, never mind the fact that we've had stagnant wages for 40 years, they would love me, because their whole thing is based off of what they see versus what they know. Forget the fact that 2 years ago, Candace Owens, for continuing that example, used to criticize Trump on a website, along with all the other sane people. They don't care. They will turn their brain off. They will say, "Oh, get over that, whatever." That's why they voted for Cruz after he got, stomped by Trump verbally, and in that election, all those nasty things that were said. Just get over it. Dear leader is now singing a different tune about this person. That's how they work. And if I were a Democrat, if I said, "Oh man, Trump is so horrible, Democrats are great, vote blue to save America," any of the other nonsense hashtags they come up with, "I'm with her," whatever that means, they would love me. They would all come and check my stuff out and go, "Oh man, that's such a great man. He's going against the evils in Washington." No, he's not. He's shilling out for one side to get as many people as he can to watch his little crap. But because I don't care about appeasing either side, and I said, "Hey, look, these are horrible policies. I don't care if you have a D or an R next to your name." They try to ignore me. They say, "Oh, that's an idiot. That's a person who doesn't know what side he's on." And if you bring up anything of rationale, they tune out. People have some of the closed-minded worldviews. I didn't even when did you write this? Walking Paradox. I didn't even see that. So going back to what I was saying, the real reason we're in all these wars is because the defense contractors pay out members of Congress along with the president to keep us in these wars, due to a thing that President Eisenhower described in his farewell address back in 1961, the military-industrial complex, where you have people who purposely will stay involved in these conflicts as a means of some individuals who are already rich getting more money. Let's see. Marco says voting doesn't save America, just gives you a different way of doing something bad. Yeah, when both of the candidates suck. That's why when I talked about that Arizona Senate race and that dude snapped in the comment section about me being incompetent, I was like, "What are you talking about?" The whole point was you have two people, the Democrat and the Republican, that in that particular race, who both vote with Trump over 60% of the time, a majority of the time for both. And you don't see why I would call that the lesser of two evils. They just don't get it. Or they do get it and they're trying to purposely explain away anything that is opposing of their view. Like, you will have some Trump supporters say, "Oh, he's trying to get us out of it." How? By sending more troops there? I remember I used to say the same thing to Obama supporters. They would go, "Oh, he tried to stop this. He tried to do this. Why didn't they're like, "Oh, he couldn't do this because the Republicans obstructed him," even though he had a filibuster-proof Senate for his first 2 years in office. And anytime I think about the Republicans having control of Congress, and I mean actual like control where they don't have to worry about just getting a slim majority to pass something, they would ram so much stuff down our throats it wouldn't even be funny. Walking said that's why I don't engage in online arguments anymore. People have become so arguments, it almost feels like they're arguing with themselves. Yeah, they don't want to hear anything that challenges whatever perspective they have. I was a big Obama supporter, back when he first entered office. But after someone showed me all of those different wars, along with some other things that took place, I wasn't interested, because I don't feel an inherent, like, that's the difference between me and them. Any of these politicians I can walk away from. I don't look at them and say this is the savior. This is the one person who's going to change everything, and they can't be corrupted. And now I think there are some who aren't corrupt, but if they do something that disgusts me over and over and over again, I'm not going to say, well, I voted for him 2 years ago, so I guess I have to like him or explain away anything he does. No, screw that. Yeah, they're arguing with themselves. I agree, Walking. Or Paradox, whichever name you want to be referred to as. It's just sad to see that all these people that I thought had genuine grievances with Obama when he was in office, they would just say he was terrible, and I would go, okay, that means that they're opposed to all of these different conflicts, and they would talk, because they would just say, they would trash everything he did. So I figured, yeah, they want some real change, they want a revolution, and then they get their opposing party president, he does the same thing, and they become quiet. And it was kind of scary, because I don't believe I was cognitively able to realize this back in 2009 when Obama took over, but they really mirrored Obama supporters that were more liberal than he was, where they were like, "Oh, he's going to be so great and he's going to change things," and then he does the exact same thing, and then they excuse it, or they try to pretend it's not going on, or they don't talk about it purposely, because they know if they think critically about any of this stuff, they'll realize they got scammed. And they are always so ready to make arguments about your character simply because you don't agree with them. Oh yeah, man, I've had so many people say I have Trump derangement syndrome, or I just hate on Obama for no reason. They're out of they're the ones who are out of their minds, because I can actually bring up issues that I don't like, and that I am convinced enough in my positions to be in favor of those positions regardless of who imposes them. That's why when I was talking about the better senators that are currently in office, even though I identify as someone that's liberal leaning, I said, Rand Paul's better than most of the Democrats, because on foreign policy, he's made the most sense out of most of those senators. I don't care about a party. He's only one of those I'd actually like to stay in office, because more often than not, he actually does something good or something courageous. Send troops wide to manage people and defend them like they're weak. I guess. I don't know what the point that was. I really don't know what point that comment was trying to make. I'm not trying to be funny. I got a little confused reading that. But yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. All these warmonger politicians, and you have people that they get mad at someone like Noam Chomsky, or on a much lower level, because I'm much lesser known myself, and call us unpatriotic for not liking this, for not supporting the troops, when in reality, what is it, 27%? Yeah, 27% of troops make up the homeless. So if the U.S. was truly supportive of those who go and risk their lives and serve honorably, you would think they would give them the highest priorities. You would think every single troop, when they get back home, would have a government mandated assistance fund, almost like a GoFundMe, just for participating in trying to protect American values abroad, which in that reality is pro evil, because we support over 70% of the world's dictatorships. and are bombing countries that have done nothing to us. But that's besides the point. It's all a big, little joke they're playing on people, and I really wish they would wake up to it. But again, I get told so often, just get over it, just accept that this is how things are, and it's not how things have to be. I think the quickest way to get out of all these conflicts is going to come from having a Congress, because the presidency, because due to the way that our political system is structured, is rigged to where you can only feasibly win if you have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, which is not too far off from how senators run, but on a much larger scale. And so ultimately, it's going to be a lot harder to get a person who is opposed to these wars in office versus someone that that is into Congress. So I think what we'd be better off doing is having an attempt to get most of the senators and members of the House to oppose these conflicts. That's just how I see it. And they have to run for both parties. They have to, I don't care if they are Republican or Democrat. I'll support them. Let's see. Can't expect. Oh, Walking Paradox served it up. Can't expect your people to respect your troops when your vets make up 27% of the homeless. Food for thought. I agree. Marco says there are times when Rand Paul was more agreeable than Bernie Sanders. So yeah, there was a bill that was in place that they were arguing over, and I distinctively remember agreeing more with Rand than Bernie. I forget what it was, but it's a testament to how much better he is on foreign policy than a lot of these other politicians just in the current era. It's a hell of a guy. Talk about political courage. When he went over and opposed John Brennan, that was the testament to being able to call out the system. So I appreciate both you guys for showing up in here. I wish people would open their minds to not bootlicking for one political party or another, but I don't think that's going to happen. The quickest way that this will get changed is if a majority of the members of Congress swear off taking money from corporations or PACs, overturn Citizens United, which legalized bribery 8 years ago, soon to be 9, and that's just my solution to doing this. But yeah, until people wake up, this is going to continue. And not because we're fighting all these places that want to do harm to us, but because we want our politicians and those that are in power, the defense contractors, their donors, want to make as much money as possible for themselves, regardless of who dies and who gets killed. Look at if you ever have any free time, I invite you to look up the various children in Yemen that have been starved to death, and their pictures and their photos, and see their rib cages and them looking akin to living skeletons, and then tell me how much of a threat they are to us. I told you 85,000 kids in Yemen under the age of 5 have died. Those were all future terrorists. Come on. So when you use your brain, you start seeing how full of crap both parties are, and that's why I don't like either one of them. They have destroyed the U.S. and they are a bigger threat to us than any random child in some country we're bombing. Period.